Welcome to this week's Nebraska Soybean Board Weekly Market Roundup. I'm Susan Littlefield. A lot of things that we're going to take a look at today. The cool thing is we're going to start everything in the South. As you can see, John's on the screen with us, so we're going to get a real insight as to what is happening with these crops. I've seen some pictures on Twitter. We know the planters are either running or getting there to run, but is there going to be some acre disputes between wheat and soybeans?
It may be small, but this little bean fuels a lot of power. It powers a food industry as a top source of protein. It's a fuel that powers diesel engines with fewer emissions. It powers a state economy and bottom lines. And it powers the rest of the world as a top Nebraska export. Yeah, it may be small, but we're finding more ways for this little bean to power Nebraska.
We have got, of course, PJ Conradt and John Pfanner joining us now, both of them with Tredas. As we look at the markets, John, we got to start with you because the South makes things a little interesting when we wonder, is there going to be a trade war between corn and beans? Acre war, I should say.
Well, down here, there was a lot of wheat planted this year, and those acres will eventually go to beans, this summer as they harvest the wheat. So not going to be much of an acre battle there. One thing you might see, there's still maybe some push and pull left between cotton and corn. Cotton prices were up really good today. They had kind of neutralized around $1 a pound. And today we're up around $1.05 a pound. So historically, that's an extremely good price. However, chemical availability is becoming an issue down here for cotton. For those of you who don't know, cotton, it's not exactly an easy crop to raise. Sometimes it requires 8 to 10 passes over the field throughout the season. But that being said, acres are probably set other than maybe some fringe acres or, again, if chemical availability becomes a problem, but probably not enough to move the needle nationwide down here.
Is there those concerns with weather and the price that we've seen in some of these contracts of soybeans and wheat that there might be a little bit of headbutting between the two for acre numbers?
Everything is generally pretty high priced. That's kind of the reason why there may not be a lot of the only thing that cotton gives an advantage on the insured price. Right now, your guarantee per acre is higher dollars per acre than corn. However, sometimes it just does come down to rotation as well. I know a lot of guys, when I asked if cotton prices were going higher this year, would they switch and go a lot heavier cotton and maybe get rid of corn and go more, 15 years ago, that's how it was down here. There wasn't hardly any corn. But most of them said they found out that it's a great rotation. Cotton grows really well after a grain. And so they're probably going to kind of stick to that rotation unless something gets really out of whack. And right now, when you look at the numbers, nothing's far enough out of whack to really move that needle.
Where are you at when it comes to planting right now? Because I know I've seen a few pictures.
So here in North Alabama, we haven't started yet. It's still been cool. We do get the cold fronts that come down here far enough. Now you get down into Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, places like that, planters are rolling. In fact, down South Texas in the valley, they've been rolling for a while. They've been rolling for about 2 to 3 weeks. But overall, we're barely just getting started as the Southeast as a whole. But over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'll probably see, especially if it dries out and weather warms up here in North Alabama, we will definitely start seeing the planters roll.
All right, PJ, he just used a word that we don't get to say, and that's dry out. It's extremely dry up in our neck of the woods. Having said that, what pressure is that going to put on planting here?
Here in southeast Nebraska, we got either side of an inch of rain last night, and I keep getting text notifications from our school's bus that they are not going to travel on any gravel roads because they cannot get up and down them. So that's the 1 inch of rain really changed things. And yes, we're dry. Have faith that we're going to get rain. Where we go from here and acres aside, I do think one thing that John said about fertilizer and chemical on cotton, does that affect, say, the Dakotas when it comes to can they get product when they need it? I know internally we have a client that bought some ground up in South Dakota, maybe is having some issues locking things in and guaranteeing delivery. And that should be on everyone's mind, but that's nothing, it's out of your control. So you can't let that dictate you either. So.
Well, we only got 20 hundredths here, so you must have been in the garden spot. Having said that, though, is there going to be a corn versus bean acre to the north war going on?
There very well could be. I think my general opinion on this, and talking with other, let's say agronomists in the area, is there was a lot of fall anhydrous put down. So maybe a lot of those corn acres in central Nebraska in general are decided. The Dakotas, to me, and that's always every year, it's the fringe acres. So you take your Dakotas, et cetera. Are they going to plant more corn or beans? I believe, and don't quote me on this, but they plant a lot of soybeans last year, South Dakota, North Dakota. You're not going to go beans on beans. So what are you going to do if you're having a hard time getting fertilizer? Do you go more of a milo, more of a feed grain type situation, especially where there's short forage type things up there? Could that affect our acre situation longer term? I would assume that to be a very viable thing, but what's USDA going to show in 2 weeks? That's the $100 million question, and I'm not going to step in front of that bus either.
John, as we look to the south, what's old crop look like for you guys? Are the bins pretty empty?
Yep, bins are getting empty. This is very typical for the South. As we are getting prepared to go to the field, and our crop season is it's a little more broken out. Our planting season. So we'll roll into corn, and then some early season beans, and then cotton, and then we'll harvest wheat, and we'll plant our late season beans after wheat. And so they like to have all their corn moved because come say 1st of April, they're busy all the way through the end of June, middle of July. I mean, and then you got your spraying, your post applications, things like that. So yeah, bins are about empty down here for the most part. The inverse in the market here, May futures were about 30 to 40 cents higher than July for the better part of the last month, or maybe a little longer. So the inverse did its job. It emptied the bins out. Basis was strong. Now with the wheat market and everything, when the war started, Ukraine and Russia, wheat market went kind of bananas, went up $5 in literally, I think, 6 or 7 trading sessions. And so that also caused those inverses in corn and beans to blow apart too, and get further inverted. And so that kind of exacerbated getting that corn and those beans moved out. But also then it got people scared, and they started rolling to the July, and it caused a lot of basis issues and a lot of confusion for about a week. But it's kind of settled out now, and the market has kind of, I guess, reached a more equilibrium. I guess it's probably not the best term, but it's settled down to where things are trading more normal now.
All right. Well, as we continue here at the Nebraska Soybean Board Weekly Market Roundup, it's being brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff. PJ, in the north, I've seen a lot of grain moving out of bins, a lot of old crop headed out. Basis numbers with this old crop, what are you thinking?
Definitely. Here's my kind of catch-all to all of it. If you have hedges on it and you're looking at old crop stuff, I think you got to be proactive and move things. April, May is a great time if you can logistically pull it off, just because we're going to see some sort of short pump there in basis. As a farmer, I don't necessarily, unless they're gambling bushels, think you should really roll into, say, July, August, Sep, thinking you're going to see this massive better number. It historically is not a good idea to keep rolling through inverses. And so I'm really trying to deter people from that, unless you're willing to take $1 up or down. But you could say the same thing about futures price. If you're unhedged, is there really, we can sit here and say, yes, just throw out a number, 20 under basis for March is bad. Well, yes, it is bad, but at the same time, you're looking at, that's 692 corn in this environment. That's great. That's not focused so much on basis, which, we really preach basis and everything else. But at the same time, when you have futures levels where they're at, sometimes it's best to part ways and not worry about some of those finer details when you're catching $1 rally in the last 3 weeks with everything going on. Let's part ways with it. Be happy with what we have and focus on this 22 crop before we get planted too.
Are we worried about any freight costs as prices continue to rise?
It seems like on the rail, definitely there's increased freight costs there, fuel surcharges and the BN and car costs and everything with the UP is potentially going to cause some havoc when it comes to basis. Ethanol, obviously always a driver. What's going to drive that moving forward? Margins aren't great, but historically they're never great. So let's just hope everyone keeps grinding and we find homes for everything. We don't see my larger term concern. You look at this from a bigger picture standpoint is what kind of demand destruction are we trying to do or is happening that we're not realizing right now that will come out to be here in 3, 4, 5 months that no one's thinking about. And that's the thing, I guess, if you're looking for a black swan, so to speak, that's where prices can really roll back. And that's why I'm a big proponent, and John as well, of this being proactive sellers. We can be patient, but we got to be proactive too.
John, I see you shaking your head in definite agreement with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, if your bias is that the futures could go higher, or you just have that fear of missing out that futures could go significantly higher, and that's a real fear, right? We just saw wheat. You know, guys are fairly heavily marketed on wheat by this time of year, and it just went up $5. Now, granted, that was an extremely, well, it was the first time it ever happened. I was going to say abnormal, but it's never happened. So thinking that it can't happen in other commodities would be a little bit naive. So, you know, if you are, I'm like Phil, there's a lot of money on the table right now. Take it. And if you want to, you know, stay long your corn or whatever it is, beans, buy some call options, and then just start focusing on 22 crop, because the black swan that he's talking about is, you know, have we, with these higher prices, destroyed demand enough to where we're going to have a bigger carryout than what we expect right now? You know, in 2 months, is that carryout going to have grown by 300 or 400 million bushels? And then all of a sudden we're actually raising a decent crop, and then boom, prices fall off, and you carried, you know, corn through a 35-40 cent inverse, and then now we're at 575 instead of 740. I think I'm in the same boat. You know, just if you want to stay long ownership, buy it on paper, get rid of the physical bushels, get that headache gone, so you can focus on planting a crop, spraying a crop. You don't have to worry about moving bushels in the summer.
Real quick, want to ask you this weekend, how much influence is that going to have on Sunday night's trade, not knowing what's happening in the Black Sea region?
That's it's obviously going to have a reaction. Exactly. But overall, we have a lot of that baked in. I think really the headline risk at this point is, do things get worse? You know, to China meeting with U.S., et cetera. What happens to all that?
Just a reminder, commodity futures and options do involve a